I met Ryan 6 years ago at a teacher training seminar, of all places. He was this laid-back, easygoing guy, the type who never seemed to let anything get under his skin. Meanwhile, I was always the planner, the perfectionist, the one making sure everything was done right. We balanced each other out, or at least that's what I thought. The first few years of marriage were fine, mostly smooth sailing, aside from the usual little arguments every couple has, but somewhere along the way, things shifted. It wasn't one big dramatic moment, nothing like that. Just small things, his passiveness, my short temper, the way he started tuning me out when I spoke. I should have known it was building up to something, but I didn't. I never thought I'd be writing this, but here I am, sitting in my childhood bedroom, trying to make sense of how everything fell apart so fast. It still feels surreal like one moment. I had a husband, a home, a life I built from the ground up, and the next I was packing my bags, walking through the front door of my parents' house, and feeling like I'd failed at being an adult. Ryan and I met 6 years ago at a professional development seminar for teachers. I still remember how effortlessly he struck up a conversation with me. He was calm, confident, the type of person who could turn a boring event into an interesting experience just by being there. I, on the other hand, had a planner open on my lap, highlighter in hand, ready to take notes like my entire career depended on it. He found that amusing. I found him annoying. And yet, somehow, we ended up talking the entire evening. We started dating soon after, and honestly, those first couple of years were great even. He was everything I wasn't. Easygoing, patient, able to laugh things off when I got too serious. I liked to plan every detail of my life, and he was more of a go-with-the-flow kind of guy. At the time, I thought it was the perfect balance. He kept me from stressing too much, and I made sure he didn't just drift through life without direction. But somewhere along the way, that balance started to shift. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just small changes, tiny cracks forming in what I thought was a solid foundation. I started noticing how he stopped taking things seriously, how little effort he put into planning our future together. I would talk about goals, savings, or even simple things like what to do over the weekend, and he'd brush it off with, "We'll figure it out." That used to be one of the things I loved about him, his ability to stay relaxed no matter what, but after a while it stopped being charming. It started feeling like I was pulling all the weight in our relationship, and maybe I started resenting him for it. At first I told myself it was just a rough patch. Every couple has them, right? I figured things would work themselves out, but instead of improving, it got worse. Our conversations turned into arguments, then silence. He started tuning me out, and I started losing my patience faster than ever. I should have seen the warning signs. I should have realized we were headed towards something irreversible. But I didn't. The night everything changed. Wasn't anything special, not an anniversary. Not a major fight. Not some dramatic betrayal. It was just a regular evening that spiraled out of control. Ryan had come home late from work again. This wasn't new, and I'd stopped waiting up for him long ago. When he walked through the door, I was already in my pajamas, scrolling on my phone while sitting on the couch. I heard the familiar jingle of his keys hitting the counter, followed by the sigh he always made when he kicked off his shoes. Normally, I'd let it go. I'd gotten used to his schedule, used to feeling like I was in a relationship with a ghost. But that night, I couldn't ignore it. "You could have at least texted," I said, not even looking up. He exhaled loudly, already irritated. "Steph, I told you, work ran late." "It always runs late," I shot back. "Funny how that never happened before we got married." He ran a hand through his hair, already exhausted. "I don't know what you want me to say. I was working." I slammed my phone onto the coffee table. "I want you to care, Ryan. I want you to act like this marriage matters to you, like I matter to you." He shook his head and let out a bitter laugh. "God, here we go again. You make it sound like I don't do anything." "Because you don't," I snapped, standing up. "You just drift through life, expecting me to handle everything while you do the bare minimum." His jaw tightened, and for the first time in a while, he actually looked at Menet through me, not around me, but at me. "You really think that?" His voice was quiet but sharp. I folded my arms, feeling my own anger rising like a tidal wave. "Yeah, I do. And you know what? Maybe I was stupid to think you'd ever change." That hit him. I could see it in the way his expression darkened, in the way his shoulders tensed like he was holding something back. But instead of yelling, Instead of fighting back like I expected him to, just nodded. "Okay," he said simply. That threw me off. "What do you mean, okay?" "I mean, I get it now," he said, his voice strangely calm. "I've spent years thinking we were just going through a rough patch, that things would get better. But you," he laughed dryly, shaking his head, "you've already decided I'm a failure." I rolled my eyes, crossing my arms tighter. "Oh, please, don't turn this into a pity party. I'm just asking you to be better." He took a step back, his expression unreadable. "No, you're not." I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" He sighed, like he had finally made a decision he had been putting off for a long time. "You don't want me to be better. You want me to be different, and that's not going to happen." And then, before I could say anything else, he walked away. Not just out of the room, out of the house. No yelling, no slamming doors, just silence. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I was the one left standing there, completely stunned. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the door like I expected him to walk back in. He always came back. After every fight, every disagreement, Ryan was the one who eventually calmed down and tried to make things right. But this time, something felt different. I checked my phone. No texts, no missed calls. I let out a scoff and sat back down on the couch, trying to shake off the weird feeling settling in my stomach. He's just cooling off, that's all. He'd go for a drive, maybe vent to one of his friends, then he'd come home and we'd talk about it in the morning. Except that didn't come home. The first hour, I was still angry. By the second, I was annoyed. By the third, I was pacing the living room, calling his phone, getting sent straight to voicemail. Where the hell did he go? By the time the clock hit midnight, my confidence started cracking. I checked our shared bank account, no transactions. That meant he wasn't at a hotel or a bar. He had just disappeared. And I didn't know why that scared me so much. At 3 a.m., I gave up and went to bed, figuring he'd come home once I was asleep. At 8 a.m., I woke up alone. His side of the bed was untouched. His keys were gone. His car was gone. And the worst part? His dresser drawer was open. Half his clothes were missing. That's when it really hit me. This wasn't just a dramatic exit. Ryan left. I grabbed my phone and called him again. Voicemail. Then I texted him. "Ryan, where are you? Are you serious right now?" No response. I threw my phone onto the bed and let out a frustrated groan. What was he trying to prove? That he could ignore me? That he had some kind of power over me now? Well, I wasn't going to play that game. I was fine without him. At least that's what I told myself. Day 2. Still no word. I went to work, trying to act normal, but I was checking my phone every 5 minutes. My coworkers noticed I was tense, but I brushed them off. "Just tired," I said. But I wasn't tired. I was unraveling. Day 3. I finally caved and called his best friend, Mark. "Hey, have you seen Ryan?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Mark was silent for a second. Then he said, "Yeah." I felt a weird mix of relief and anger. "Okay, well, can you tell him to stop being ridiculous and come home?" Mark sighed. "Steph, I don't think he's coming home." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" I demanded. "I mean, he's done." Mark's voice was firm. "He told me everything, Steph. The way you talk to him, the way you belittle him. He said he's finally done being the guy you settle for." My mouth went dry. "That's ridiculous. We had one fight." Mark let out a humorless laugh. "Steph, you didn't have one fight. You've had years of fights. You just didn't notice how much they were wearing him down." I opened my mouth to argue, but I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew he was right. Ryan had always been patient. He never yelled, never stormed out until now. I had spent years pushing and testing him, assuming he'd always stay. But now, he wasn't coming back. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea what to do. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, replaying Mark's words over and over. "He's finally done being the guy you settle for." It didn't make sense. Ryan wasn't the type to give up on things. He was the steady one, the one who fixed things when I got too worked up or let my emotions spiral. He was the one who stayed. Except now he was gone. I sat on the couch, phone in my lap, staring at our last conversation. My last text was still unread. No dots. No reply. The silence was deafening. That night I barely slept. I kept expecting to hear the front door open, to wake up and find Ryan in the kitchen, making his usual morning coffee like nothing had happened. But he never came. By day 5, I cracked. I drove to Mark's place, convinced that if I could just see Ryan, I could talk some sense into him. But when I knocked, Ryan wasn't there. Mark answered the door, arms crossed. "Steph, don't do this." I tried to push past him. "I just need to talk to him." "He's not here." I frowned. "Where is he?" Mark hesitated. "He moved out." I blinked. "What?" "He got a place a couple of towns over, signed a lease yesterday." My heart dropped. He wasn't just staying with a friend. He was gone. "Steph," Mark sighed. "He's not coming back." I shook my head. He's just mad. He needs time." Mark gave me this look, Biddy. "That's what he told me too," he said. "For years. That things would get better. That you didn't mean half the stuff you said. That you loved him deep down." He exhaled. "But Steph, how long can someone live like that?" I swallowed hard. I wanted to argue, to tell Mark he didn't understand. But the truth was, Ryan had warned me. So many times. Every time I snapped at him in front of his friends, every time I brushed off his feelings, every time I pushed and pushed and pushed just to see how much he'd take. I thought he'd always be there. But I was wrong. And now, I had to live with it. 3 months later. The house was too quiet. Ryan had officially filed for divorce 2 weeks ago. I didn't fight it. What was there to fight for? He had already moved on. Literally. The last time I checked his social media because, yes, I checked, he was smiling in a picture at some new hiking trail with a group of people I didn't recognize. He looked different. More confident. More relaxed. Like losing me had been the best thing that ever happened to him. Meanwhile, I was stuck in the wreckage of my own making. I had moved back in with my parents because staying in our empty house was unbearable. I had tried to go out, to meet new people, to move on, but nothing felt right. Every time I saw a happy couple, every time I heard a joke in a friend group and remembered how I used to be the one making them, I felt this horrible, sinking feeling in my stomach. I never thought I'd be the one left behind. But here I was, alone. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself.